The Kirby series. It's my favorite of all of Nintendo's franchises, and my only source of happiness in this miserable world. But I already covered this when I talked about the first game, Kirby's Dream Land. Just to summarize my thoughts, I thought it was a fun little Game Boy game, but its gameplay was just a bit too simple because Kirby didn't have his signature copy abilities yet, so you were limited to just inhaling enemies and shooting them back out. But in 1993, 1 year after Kirby's Dream Land, the pink puffball would finally receive his copy abilities in the sequel, Kirby's Dream Land 2. Oh wait, silly me. Kirby's Dream Land 2 is the third game. Today we're talking about Kirby's Adventure for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Can I just say, while the Japanese box art is fine, the US art is way better in my opinion. Anyway, yeah, this was an NES deal in 1993, which was kinda confusing to me because the Super Nintendo had already been out for like over 2 years at the time. But apparently, it all came down to finances. The developer HAL Laboratory was basically bankrupt, and this game needed to come out as soon as possible, if not sooner. According to the game's director and Kirby creator Masahiro Sakurai, it would have taken too long to develop the game on SNES, so even though he would have liked to release the game on the system because of its new and flowering player base, the team could crank out a game for the NES in their sleep. I mean, they've been developing for the system for nearly a decade. It was their bread and butter. Starting up the game, we're greeted to a fun tutorial teaching us how to draw our hero. Look, I did a art. And to tell you the truth, I'm shocked. This game actually has color. Being on a real man's console instead of the piss brick will do that to you. Our story begins when Kirby awakes from his slumber to the realization that he didn't have any dreams. So he does what anyone else would do in this situation and goes to investigate the Fountain of Dreams, the source of all dreams in Dreamland, powered by the magical Star Rod. Upon reaching the fountain, he finds the despicable despot, King Dedede, taking a bath, with the Star Rod nowhere to be found. You remember King Dedede, right? He's the guy from the first game who stole all the food Stalin style. Kirby interrogates the king about the Star Rod.
Oh, that old thing! I broke it into 7 pieces and gave each piece to one of my friends!
Before the king can even finish, Kirby storms off, determined to defeat each of King Dedede's allies and restore the Star Rod, so everyone can have pleasant naps again. What a noble marshmallow this guy is. But before we embark on this so-called Kirby's adventure, we gotta get acquainted with the little guy's moveset. Things are largely the same as in the first game. Run, jump, fly, swallow your enemy's whole, you know, the basics. But this game added something that would change the course of Kirby history forever. The slide attack. Oh, and there's also the copy ability, no big deal. All jokes aside, the copy ability is a landmark addition for the series. It's what everyone knows Kirby for. I complained about the lack of variety in the combat of Kirby's Dream Land because it just consists of inhaling an enemy and shooting them back out. But Kirby's Adventure rectifies that by introducing 24 unique abilities to harness for combat, mobility, or even getting a good night's rest. Speaking of useless abilities like sleep, there's even the light power, which is a one-use ability that can light up rooms. This power is reduced to a candle. Each ability has one action that can be used by pressing the B button, with the exception of Sword and Hammer, which have special aerial attacks. This really shows how the copy ability concept was in its infancy at the time, which isn't really a fault of the game, but it makes it a bit harder to go back to. In the future games, copy abilities have a veritable fighting game combo list worth of inputs to do all kinds of attacks. And even abilities that one power-up would have, like Fire's ability to do a fireball dash, is its own separate copy ability in this game. Yeah, seeing that there were separate Ice and Freeze abilities in this game was a bigger shock to me than if I found out I was adopted. Another thing that bugs me about the copy abilities is... every time you get hit, you lose your ability, and you have to retrieve it. Every single time! But those small complaints aside, the copy ability is such a novel idea that took the Kirby series to the next level. I mean, look at Kirby with the backdrop ability, suplexing fools like there's no tomorrow. You can't tell me that's not amazing. Now let's talk levels in this game. Well, to start, HAL Laboratory has really improved their alliteration game. Every English teacher should be proud. Vegetable Valley, Grape Garden, Butter Building, come on, these are fantastic. Each level is split up into separate stages, kind of like in Mario 3 with its different worlds, and all these really add a lot more length to the game. Just for reference, Kirby's Dream Land took me 30 minutes to beat, but Adventure took me 5 times longer at 2.5 hours. Unfortunately, even though there's a lot more stages in this game, all the stages in a level really don't stand out too much from each other. Obviously they're all centered around a theme, like, look at this building, but I really couldn't tell you definitively what was in each stage, like, oh, Butter Building Stage 3 is my favorite. Littered across each level's hubs are little bonus rooms, and some contain the arena, in which Kirby can fight one of the many mid-bosses in order to obtain a Maxim Tomato, as well as the mid-boss's ability. There's also museum rooms, which just contain 2 enemies that you can inhale for a free ability. There's Egg Catcher, where King Dedede hurls eggs and bombs at you in Kirby's quest for more protein. Then there's Quick Draw, where Kirby faces off against several enemies with the power of gun violence. And worst of all, a crane game! Every level's last stage is a boss battle with one of King Dedede's allies to reclaim a piece of the Star Rod, and the boss fights in this game are actually really good. Starting off with Wispy Woods. I guess because he did such a good job in the last game. Next there's Paint Roller, who's painting some to life, and the literal sun and moon. Can I just say, this is a super cool concept for a boss fight. One of them comes down to fight you while the other attacks from above, and they switch off. I'm just worried about the tides. Kracko makes a return, and in his Kracko Jr. phase, you have to fly to the top quickly to conserve your health for the actual boss fight. Heavy Mole? This one sucks. Meta Knight makes his debut, showing up in many stages throughout the game, sometimes to give you an invincible candy to power you up, other times to sick his minions on you to kill you. I don't get you. In Meta Knight's boss fight, he provides you with a sword like the honorable warrior he is, and the skirmish ensues. After Kirby strikes the deciding blow and takes victory over Meta Knight, the swordsman's mask splits in two, revealing that underneath, he looks just like Kirby. This plot point has not been expanded upon in the past 30 years. After collecting 6 of the 7 pieces of the Star Rod, Kirby makes his way to the final level, Rainbow Resort, home to some of the more challenging stages in the game. Once he gets to stage 6 though... Sick reference. Stage 6 of Rainbow Resort is amazing. It's a direct callback to Kirby's Dream Land, from the music to everything being black and white, except for Kirby himself. It even takes you through an abridged version of every area from the original game, and once completed, we're back to the Fountain of Dreams to fight the final boss, King Dedede. Just like the first game, he uses his giant hammer in considerable size to try and squash Kirby, but this time he can float as well. Even with this new move in his arsenal, it's quite an easy fight, and Kirby quickly reclaims the final piece, reassembling the Star Rod. As he goes to return it to its rightful place, the king catches up to Kirby and holds onto him with a look of horror in his eyes. Shaking his head aggressively, he begs Kirby not to return the Star Rod to the fountain. But the pink puff just hits him aside, clearly done with his antics. Kirby places the rod back onto the pedestal, and all is right with the world. Just kidding. A horrible monster emerges from the fountain, Nightmare, the manifestation of bad dreams. King Dedede had known that the Fountain of Dreams was infected by Nightmare, and by continuing to let the spring flow, all the people in Dreamland would suffer. So King Dedede had to hide the Star Rod, protecting the people in the only way he could, which means Kirby is the real antagonist in this story. He lets his biases get the better of him, and doesn't listen to King Dedede's warnings, automatically assuming that he's up to no good. Obviously, he has his reasons to believe that, but it's a great twist that even has an interesting message to it. Now that Kirby has doomed the land, King Dedede shoots him off into the stratosphere with the Star Rod with a hearty,
"It's your problem now!"
I'd assume. Kirby catches up with the malevolent orb and the true final battle begins. This boss fight has Kirby flying through the air shooting stars at the Nightmare orb. It's very reminiscent of the Kabula fight from the first game, except this time with some questionably difficult to dodge projectiles. After defeating this phase of the fight, Nightmare ascends to the moon with Kirby close behind. Taking the form of a ghostly wizard, Nightmare is now immune to the Star Rod's attacks, except for on his torso, which is obscured by his cloak most of the time. However, if Kirby can land a couple more hits... The moon freaking explodes! Now I'm really worried about the tides. Our hero triumphantly flies back down to Dreamland, where King Dedede is there to meet him. Maybe now they can finally reach a mutual understanding and become friends. The Star Rod is returned to the Fountain of Dreams, and the people of Dreamland can sleep soundly once again. Kirby's Adventure is a stellar title, and given its late introduction to the library and HAL Laboratory's myriad of experience with the console, it's safe to say this game was absolutely made for the NES. Unfortunately, the NES was not made for this game. What I mean is, the performance is very bad in some parts, slowdown and lag abound, and anytime more than 7 sprites appear on the screen at once, the NES pleads for death. Sometimes it's hard to even move because it gets so bad, which results in getting hit more, which results in... It sucks because other than the performance issues, this game is awesome. It evolves everything that the original game started, from the copyability to the size of the levels, the boss fights, story, and even the music, with pretty much every Kirby game following this one having leitmotifs of these songs in theirs. It truly was a power-up for the series in every sense of the word. What's better is King Dedede's redemption arc, which is more than I can say about Stalin.